You missed some important news from the LGBTQ plus community this week. To ensure you are current, we are recapping that important news. Here's what you may have missed. Well, we're going to begin by breaking news, queering up breaking news. Did Governor Ron DeSantis and the Florida GOP supermajority end drag queens and gay pride celebrations with today's new law? Today, the Florida legislature is debating FS 827.11. It may be the most anti-LGBTQ plus legislation in American history, at least since the Stonewall riots in 1969. The language of the law will define live performance to a standard that virtually would make drag queen performance impossible in Florida in its current format. This is a very complicated story, and we encourage you to follow closely as the law is designed on a very legal basis to ban drag queens, force gay pride organizations to ban drag or cancel their events, and will affect every bar, restaurant, hotel, and event in Florida that hosts an event with a drag queen, whether children or alcohol are present or not.
827.11 defines, quote, adult live performance means any show, exhibition, or other presentation in front of a live audience which, in whole or in part, depicts or simulates nudity, sexual conduct, sexual excitement, or specific sexual activities as those terms are defined in existing law, lewd conduct, or the lewd exposure of prosthetic or imitation genitals or breasts.
The definition of this live performance continues to define predominantly appeals to a prurient, shameful or morbid interest, is patently offensive to prevailing standards in the adult community of this state, end quote. This incredibly vague standard is hinged on a Supreme Court decision defining prurient. We will explain that definition in a moment, but this is a key component that will set this statute, if passed, to survive state and even a federal constitutional challenge.
Today's 827.11 continues, quote, by saying, as a whole, with respect to what is suitable material or conduct for the age of the child present and taken as a whole, is without serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value for the age of the child present, end quote. This definition in the law will allow any enforcement interpretation to remove the legal defense of artistic or other value and will use the Supreme Court decision defining prurient standard as that may overcome even a constitutional First Amendment defense.
827.11 has virtual certainty of passing because of the GOP supermajority in the Florida legislature and the desires of Governor Ron DeSantis. Critics bring attention to how insidious the law's introduction is today. Prurient is a 1984 Supreme Court case, Brockett versus Spokane decision. The ruling decided that the term prurient was not overbroad in interpretation and is not constitutionally overbroad. The GOP framers of this law have specifically defined drag ban using the constitutionally protected term prurient directly in this legislation. It was likely designed to prevent legal court challenges.
In the decision, prurient was defined as, quote, that which incites lasciviousness or lust, obscenity, lewd, obscene materials, and creates longing, end quote. This interpretation was supported by 1957's Roth versus United States and 1973's Miller versus California to further define state criminal statutes governing obscenity. One part of the test adopted by the court requires that in order to be found obscene, the materials in question must appeal to the prurient interest in sex. The Florida legislature will defend today's law as drag queens, with their breastplates, exotic makeup, wigs, and costumes, are an inherent sexual experience.
Worse, the Court of Appeals invoked the overbreadth doctrine to invalidate other state statutes before the state courts even had an opportunity to apply and construe that law. Using this prurient interest approach could interfere with the enactment as well as the enforcement of both federal and state obscenity legislation.
Finally, the court found that lewd is synonymous with obscene matter. And that means any matter which the average person, applying contemporary community standards, would find, when considered as a whole, appeals to the prurient interest, and which explicitly depicts or describes patently offensive representations or depictions of ultimate sexual acts, normal or perverted, actual or simulated, or masturbation, fellatio, cunnilingus, bestiality, excretory functions, or lewd exhibition of the genitals or genital area, including artificial representation.
This is likely why the Hyatt Regency Miami case focused on the alleged simulated sexual acts by drag queens and justified today's legislation. On this matter, the court ruled, quote, and which, when considered as a whole and in the context in which it is used, lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value, end quote. So, the legislation introduced and debated today sets up a Supreme Court standard and redefines it against drag queens.
Today's legislation is designed to balance and prevent legal constitutional challenges, even from the First Amendment. The court cites New York versus Ferber in 1982 as the traditional rule is that, quote, a person to whom a statute may constitutionally be applied may not challenge that statute on the ground that it may conceivably be applied unconstitutionally to others in situations not before the court, end quote. The First Amendment overbreadth doctrine, therefore, is a limited exception to this rule. It permits a party whose actions are not immune from punishment under a properly drafted law to challenge the constitutionality of the law of a, quote, sweeping statute or one incapable of limitation, end quote. In other words, prurient interest may be a court dog whistle for this ban to survive legal challenges.
Kid Rock appears to make violent anti-trans video. Vile, disgusting, dangerous. Kid Rock seems to hate trans people and really hate their being associated with a beer company. To prove it, he posted an extremely violent video on Twitter.
Grandpa's feeling a little frisky today. Let me say something to all you and be as clear and concise as possible. Fuck Bud Light and fuck Anheuser-Busch. Have a terrific day.
Rock, whose real name is Robert James Ritchie, seems angry that Anheuser-Busch, which owns Bud Light, is embracing the trans community, specifically social media influencer Dylan Mulvaney. She's partnered with Bud and Bud Light for a very clever social media campaign promoting a sports-related contest where she hugs cans of Bud Light and shows off a one-of-a-kind can with her face on it.
Hi. Impressive carrying skills, right? I got some Bud Lights for us. So, I kept hearing about this thing called March Madness, and I thought we were all just having a hectic month, but it turns out it has something to do with sports. And I'm not sure exactly which sport, but either way, it's a cause to celebrate. This month, I celebrated my day 365 of womanhood, and Bud Light sent me possibly the best gift ever, a can with my face on it. Check out my Instagram story to see how you can enjoy March Madness with Bud Light and maybe win some money too. Love ya! Cheers! Go team! Whatever team you love, I love too. Okay. Love ya. Okay, break a leg. Woo!
The contrast is clear. Her video is light, tongue-in-cheek fun. Kid Rock is the opposite. He avoids making a verbal connection, but the message was clear to his followers, who posted equally vile support in the comment section. More than 8 million people viewed the video in the first 2 days. At a time when lawmakers support legal discrimination against trans, this type of video from a rough conservative rock star becomes especially dangerous and incendiary, sending a message that could be interpreted that violence against trans people and their allies is justified. What are they scared of? Well, apparently this. This is video from Trans Day of Visibility last week at the Pride Center in Wilton Manors. There were musical performances, poetry readings, and more. Trans people contribute to society like everybody else, but while being threatened every step of the way. As for Mulvaney, she hasn't responded to Rock's video, but she has posted, quote, "If you are in a position of power to hire someone trans or non-binary, please do. We need to exist in every space. I want to see trans people doing all the brand deals," end quote. If that happens, Kid Rock's head will explode, likely faster than those cases of Bud Light. Couple fun facts for you. Bud products are prominently featured, there you go, on the menu of his Nashville restaurant. Also, while she has about 1.7 million followers on Instagram, Kid Rock has fewer than 1 million. Sounds like a case of follower envy.
Doctor Who gets even more queer as the Doctor-to-be joined by Jinx Monsoon. Jinx Monsoon, winner of the 5th season of RuPaul's Drag Race and the 7th season of RuPaul's Drag Race All-Stars, has been added to the cast of the BBC's long-running and immensely popular Doctor Who series. Jinx is said to be playing a major but as of yet undisclosed role. Showrunner Russell T Davies said, quote, "In a galaxy of comets and supernovas, here comes the biggest star of all. Jinx Monsoon is on a collision course with the TARDIS, and Doctor Who will never be the same again," end quote. Doctor Who returns in November 2023 with 3 special episodes, with David Tennant as the 14th Doctor to coincide with the 60th anniversary. Tennant and Catherine Tate are reprising their roles for the show's 60th anniversary, and the BBC has confirmed that they will appear in 3 special episodes, set to air in November this year. The next Doctor, played by sex education star Ncuti Gatwa, will take control of the TARDIS after Tennant, with his first episode airing over the festive period.
The actress, singer, and 2-time Drag Race winner said, "I'm honored, thrilled, and utterly excited to join Doctor Who. Russell T Davies is a visionary and a brilliant writer. I can't wait to get into the weeds with him and the crew. I hope there's room in the TARDIS for my luggage."
Texas may penalize drag shows with a $10,000 fine for being erotic, abnormal, and shameful.
Senate Bill 12 changes the definition of sexually oriented performances to include male performers acting as female and female performers acting as men that are sexual. It would effectively ban children from attending drag shows, and business owners can't allow a sexually oriented performance to happen with kids under the age of 18. Violators would face a civil penalty of up to $10,000. Senate Bill 1601 would take funding away from public libraries and host events where people dress as the opposite gender. But opponents say these bills vilify drag queens, further marginalizing them.
And drag is a form of art, and like any form of art, it can be modified for children. There are going to be drag shows where we do not want kids in the shows, okay? We're not trying to say that all drag is good for kids. We're trying to say there are appropriate times that drag is modified to be safe for kids.
There are certainly Broadway shows, my goodness, Peter Pan. Before any of us were born, this lady named Sandy Duncan,
Yes.
a female, played Peter Pan. There's no prurient interest that doesn't comply under the statute to be covered by a bill like this, if that's helpful.
And supporters of the bill say this is about protecting children. And again, that testimony is still happening. It's happening right behind us with almost 100 people scheduled to testify on both bills. So we're going to be here for a while. Back to you, Brian and Ashley.
Well, the Texas Senate has advanced bills restricting certain drag shows. During last week's committee hearing, dozens of drag performers and their allies testified against these bills, outnumbering significantly the bill's supporters. Opponents of legislation also said the Republican-led efforts to criminalize certain drag performances were attacks on Texans' First Amendment rights, while others said the legislation took away Texas parents' rights to decide what content or culture their children are exposed to. On the other side, the smaller contingent of bill's supporters say the legislation is needed to protect children from sexually explicit materials. Filed by Republican State Senator Brian Hughes of Mineola, Texas, SB 12 would impose a $10,000 fine on business owners who host drag shows in front of children. if those performances are sexually oriented. The bill defines a sexually oriented performance as one in which someone is naked or in drag and, quote, appeals to the prurient interest in sex, end quote. The U.S. Supreme Court defines prurient interest as, quote, erotic, lascivious, abnormal, unhealthy, degrading, shameful, or morbid interest in nudity, sex, or excretion, end quote. Compared to several of the Republican proposals that seek to restrict drag shows, including Senate Bill 476 that Hughes previously filed, SB 12 seems to scale down the proposed restriction on drag shows, but performers and their allies said that the bill's language is still exceptionally vague.
Let's queer up the USA View. Judge orders Texas public libraries to return banned LGBTQ+ books. A federal judge in Texas ruled that at least 12 books removed from public libraries by Llano County officials, many because of their LGBTQ+ and racial content, must be placed back onto the shelves within 24 hours. Books ordered to return to shelves include Cass, The Origins of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson. They Call Themselves the KKK, The Birth of an American Terrorist Group by Susan Campbell Bartoletti. And Being Jazz, My Life as a Transgender Teen by Jazz Jennings. U.S. District Judge Robert Pittman said in order that the library system also is required to reflect these books as available in their catalog and cannot remove any books for any reason while the case is ongoing.
Keep watching the only television news in the world from our LGBTQ+ community and stay informed on everything that is important for and about our diverse LGBTQ+ community.